Hey guys, this is our official compilations channel. If you want to check out our newest videos as soon as they're uploaded, then check out our main channel, The Misery Machine. Deborah Ann Leach, also known as Debbie, was born in June of 1995 in Hastings, a seaside borough in East Sussex, England. She was the daughter of Thomas Leach and his then-wife Elaine Clark. Debbie had Down syndrome, which made her heavily dependent on her parents for her well-being. Those who knew her described her as a gentle soul who loved to laugh and connect with others despite the communication barriers that her disability sometimes posed. She loved watching Disney films, playing with family pets, and spending time outdoors whenever she could. Hugs and smiles were abundant when Debbie was around, traits that became her signature. Looking at her photographs, you could see that she had fair skin, fine blonde hair, and often wore a pair of maroon glasses slipping down her nose, always with a bright smile on her face. As Debbie grew into her teens and early adulthood, she blossomed socially. She was described as a quiet, shy, yet playful girl who was still outgoing with people she got to know.
But life at home, unfortunately, was often problematic. This was mainly because her parents' relationship had fallen apart when Debbie was just a toddler. Tom, Debbie's father, separated from Elaine in 1997 amid a difficult divorce, reportedly after Elaine had an affair. Elaine was awarded custody of Debbie and her sisters, while Tom was granted visitation rights. Tom said that he appealed the decision, but social services decided that with their help and support, Elaine would be able to take care of Debbie and her siblings. Tom, however, felt that Elaine was an unfit mother. He believed that the system had made a mistake by automatically assuming that his children belonged with their mother. Elaine eventually went on to have a fourth child from a later relationship. Each of the four children had either a learning or physical disability that required extra care. Social services in East Sussex, where the family lived during Debbie's early years, knew the family well, and there had been ongoing concerns about Elaine's parenting skills in the home environment, as well as about some of the men in Elaine's life after Tom. Multiple agencies had been involved with the family when Debbie was a child, creating a patchwork of support plans and welfare checks. Still, Elaine retained custody, and Tom found it harder and harder to see his children. He said Elaine even remarried at one point after their divorce, and thereafter did everything she could to stop him from seeing them. Debbie adored her father. He recalled how her face lit up every time she saw him. Sadly, those visits became more and more infrequent because Elaine started to keep the kids away from him.
In 2014, when Debbie was 19, Elaine packed up and moved the family from Hastings, where Tom and the other relatives live, to Leeds. She wanted to be with her new boyfriend, Robert Bruce, who lived in Rothwell near Leeds. There, the new couple and the kids would live together as a family. This move effectively distanced Debbie from her father and from the Sussex social workers who had been monitoring the family for years. However, it seemed that the change was benefiting Debbie at first. While in Leeds, Debbie enrolled in a local college special education program and also attended a daycare center for adults with disabilities. Those programs gave her structure, friends, and professional oversight. By all accounts, Debbie was flourishing in Leeds. She also had her first boyfriend and enjoyed a degree of independence outside of the home. While in Leeds, Elaine held it together enough to get by. She was receiving state benefits of approximately £215 per week, specifically to care for Debbie. Family members seemed to suggest that Elaine was lazy and selfish as a mother, often more focused on her own wants than the needs of her children.
Then in August of 2016, after about 2 years in Leeds, Elaine moved the family yet again, this time roughly 100 miles away to Blackpool, a town on the northwest coast. They moved into a small terraced house at 15 Garden Terrace in Blackpool's South Shore district. Obviously, when they relocated to Blackpool, Debbie's supportive routines went away. Blackpool social services were not deeply familiar with the family's history and had to rely on Elaine's word and any records that were transferred over. From 2016 onward, Elaine was Debbie's full-time caregiver, paid by the government to look after her vulnerable adult daughter. She did not enroll Debbie in any daycare programs or take up college classes in Blackpool. Debbie suddenly became isolated at home, entirely dependent on her mother's care. Neighbors on Garden Terrace saw Debbie outside less and less over time. Some didn't even realize an adult daughter lived in the house. Behind closed doors, the care that Debbie desperately needed was slowly being taken from her. Debbie's extended family still cared about her deeply. Cousins, aunts, and of course her father back in Sussex tried reaching out. In early 2018, these relatives started hearing troubling reports.
Debbie's health was declining. She lost weight and didn't want to leave her room, and Elaine offered a string of excuses. Things like, Debbie had a skin condition, Debbie was prone to rashes, or Debbie didn't like going out, and so on. In April of 2018, the first concrete evidence of serious neglect surfaced. Debbie was brought to Clifton Hospital in St. Anne's near Blackpool for a severe skin outbreak, where doctors diagnosed her with Norwegian scabies, a highly contagious and painful skin infection. Norwegian scabies, also called crusted scabies, is often associated with unclean conditions or a compromised immune system, and it caused thick crusts and itching over her skin. Medical staff provided treatment and medication. They also gave Elaine instructions on follow-up care at home and schedule subsequent appointments, none of which she came back to the hospital for. Each time, Elaine had an excuse: car trouble, scheduling conflicts, and anything she could think of. Later in 2018, friends and family who visited the Blackpool house saw more worrying signs. Debbie's skin condition persisted. She would scratch herself raw, and her skin looked red, cracked, and sore. At least once, one of Debbie's sisters confronted their mother, urging her to get proper help for Debbie's deteriorating health. But Elaine reacted defensively. According to the sister, Elaine snapped that she should mind her own business, dismissing the concerns about Debbie.
During this period, Debbie's father remained largely out of the loop. Living in Hastings, he maintained occasional contact with Debbie over the phone. Once Debbie expressed a longing that broke his heart to recall. She said, "Dad, is there any chance I can come back to Hastings and live with you?" Debbie was an adult by then, 23 years old, and in theory, could choose where she wanted to live. But her Down syndrome meant she was not fully independent, and such decisions would have to involve social services first. Tom, not understanding the full urgency, advised her to hang in there until she was 25, thinking that perhaps by then it might be easier to arrange a move or that she might change her mind after the rough patch was over. Later lamented that if he had known what was going on, he would have jumped in his car and gone to save her.
The late summer of 2019 marked the final horrific downturn in Debbie's life. By July of that year, 24-year-old Debbie was severely malnourished, gravely ill, and living in filth. Outsiders who visited the Garden Terrace house were often kept from seeing her. On July 26, 2019, one of Elaine's relatives decided to check on Debbie in person. This was her niece, a woman named Sammy Muggeridge, who had grown increasingly alarmed by reports filtering through the family about Debbie's health. Sammy showed up unannounced at the Blackpool home. There, she saw Debbie lying on a filthy, stained mattress on the floor in a dark room. The stench was overwhelming. Sammy said she could only describe it as the stench of death filled the air. Scattered around the room were piles of dirty diapers and half-eaten takeaway food containers, some molding, which was evidence that Debbie had been left eating in her room and incontinent without proper cleaning. In the dim light, Sammy claimed that Debbie looked like a ghost of her former self. She was painfully thin, and her skin looked awful, red, scabbed, and patches of what looked like an infected rash of sores covering her body. Debbie's once long hair had been cut off unevenly to manage her scabies-infected scalp, or simply out of neglect. She was dressed in stained night clothes that had stuck to her because of the unwashed dirt. Lying there, Debbie was barely able to move and was crying out in pain, calling "Mummy, Mummy." Sammy turned to her Aunt Elaine and begged her to take action. She warned Elaine that if she did not get her help, Debbie wasn't going to survive for much longer. Elaine was annoyed at the accusation that she wasn't taking good enough care of her daughter. Still, with Debbie right there, lying in her own filth, she scrambled to do the bare minimum to get Sammy off of her back.
That same day, on July 26, 2019, Elaine contacted a general practitioner from Whitegate Health Center, who's the local doctor's office, and arranged for an emergency home visit. Plus, Sammy called Blackpool Social Services to raise a safeguarding alarm as soon as she left the house. When the general practitioner arrived later on, Elaine tried to camouflage the situation. Knowing the doctor was on the way, she hastily tidied up some of the mess and attempted to clean Debbie. According to the GP's testimony, Elaine put Debbie in the shower and tried to wash off the evidence of neglect. Debbie screamed throughout the shower. The pain on her skin must have been excruciating. With open scabies, rashes, and sores, having water and soap hit her skin would have been very painful. But Elaine managed to present her in a slightly more presentable state by the time the doctor examined her. Debbie, who was likely exhausted and frightened, was propped up on the living room sofa, freshly bathed and wearing clean clothes. This superficial cleanup was enough to fool the doctor. The doctor noted that Debbie looked thin and unwell, but when Elaine confidently explained that her daughter had a skin infection for which she was providing creams and that Debbie was eating and being cared for, the doctor took her at her word. He did not observe the bedroom, nor did he see the full extent of the scabies underneath Debbie's clothing. Concluding that there were no immediate concerns, the GP prescribed some antibiotic cream and arranged to return for a follow-up visit on August 12th. Before leaving, the doctor also talked to Blackpool Social Services about the visit, and they were set to respond soon. Social workers attempted a surprise visit to the Garden Terrace house on July 29th, but they were prevented from entering the property by a relative. Social workers left and returned the very next day, determined to see Debbie, but they were still unable to see her. By the time of the rescheduled visit on August 1st, Elaine had again prepared for this. She brought Debbie downstairs, cleaned and dressed to meet the officials. Debbie had now become skinny, and as one social worker noted, she looked very slight. But Elaine was good at pretending to be an attentive mother. She cheerfully told the visiting social workers that Debbie was doing really well and that she was eating fine and spending more time downstairs. Social workers looked into Debbie's bedroom, which was now cleaned and aired out, and they saw nothing that was lacking. The workers noted that the young woman appeared to be unwell and underweight. Since the doctor had recently visited and there was a plan for a follow-up, they did not raise an alarm at that time. Elaine had successfully masked the ongoing neglect. After this, the social services team scheduled yet another review visit for September 2nd. But throughout August 2019, Debbie's condition continued to worsen. Away from the attention of social services after August 1st, Elaine apparently resumed her pattern of neglect. Neighbors on the quiet residential street recalled hearing disturbing sounds coming from the house in the middle of the night. One neighbor reported hearing a young female voice crying out, "Mummy, Mummy," in the early hours during that last week of August. It is believed that in those final days, Debbie was confined to her bed, too weak to walk, her body infected, covered in sores, and slowly starving. Elaine later claimed she didn't realize how bad it had gotten. At the same time, she admitted that she spent her days online shopping and taking care of her own needs, buying herself handbags and shoes while her daughter was covered in filth upstairs, starving. The money that came in each week for Debbie's care was being used by Elaine herself.
By the evening of August 29th, 2019, Debbie had passed away. At 10:40 p.m. that evening, a panicked call was finally placed to emergency services. Elaine told the operator that her daughter wasn't breathing, an apparent cardiac arrest. Paramedics from Northwest Ambulance Service rushed to the address on Garden Terrace. They found Debbie lying on the bedroom floor in an unnatural, curled-up position. It was clear to the responders that she had been dead for some time. In fact, medical evidence suggested that Debbie probably passed away a day and a half earlier, meaning Elaine may have lived in the house with her daughter's body for well over a day before asking for help. The paramedics were shocked by Debbie's appearance and the overall environment of the home. They could not tell at first glance whether the person on the floor was male or female, because Debbie's once feminine features were hidden because of the neglect she suffered. Her face was completely covered in scabs and thickened skin from the untreated scabies, to the point where she was no longer recognizable as a young female. Her hair was thin and falling out in patches. The smell of decomposition and filth hit the first responders instantly. Paramedic John Wilkinson, upon seeing Debbie up close, was shaken. He would later recall that he found a live maggot on or near her body when he tried to move her. The room itself was back to the filthy, unlivable state that Sammy had witnessed. Worse, actually. Investigators later described plates of rotting food spread all around and piles of feces-covered clothing and bedding all around the mattress. Debbie's physical condition was unbelievable. She weighed only 52 pounds, which is about a third of what a healthy woman her age should weigh. In fact, the family remembered that just a few years earlier in Leeds, Debbie had weighed about 141 pounds while living a healthy life. One police officer said that Debbie looked like a skeleton when they found her. Her ribs and joints were visibly pointing outwards under her skin, and she had open sores and infected crusts over 30% of her body from scalp to feet. Her clothes were filthy. She was dressed in a stained jumper and trousers, and when paramedics began to cut the fabric away to try to resuscitate, bits of her skin came off with the cloth because it had literally stuck to her body. They found that she had been wearing an adult diaper that was heavily soiled, which suggested that she had been left in her own waste for a long period of time. The scabies mites were still present, as rescuers saw tiny mites crawling all over her back and on her bedding. The skin on her face, especially around her eyes and scalp, was described as thickened, scabbed, and raw. The soles of her feet were also covered in rashes and scabs. It was clearly an extreme, untreated scabies infestation.
Needless to say, nothing could be done to revive Debbie. Paramedics and arriving police officers realized this was not a rescue, but a potential crime scene. The post-mortem examination that followed would officially record Debbie's cause of death as severe emaciation and neglect, with a severe scabies skin infection contributing to her death. Law enforcement treated the case with the seriousness of a homicide. A major police investigation named Operation Nevada was launched by Lancashire Police's Force Major Investigation Team. Investigators swarmed the Garden Terrace house, documenting the horrible conditions and collecting evidence. Elaine was arrested at the scene on suspicion of causing her daughter's death. In total, police interviewed 6 individuals as suspects during the early phase of their inquiry. This included Elaine and her partner Robert. 4 people were arrested at first, though identities aside from Elaine and Robert were not made public. They may have included family members or others who had been at the house around that time, people who had witnessed the neglect but done nothing about it. Over the next year, detectives compiled a convincing timeline and forensic record of negligence. In March of 2021, about 18 months after Debbie's death, authorities made a big announcement. 2 people were being charged with manslaughter in connection with Debbie's passing. Those individuals were Elaine and Robert. Each of them was charged with gross negligence manslaughter. Robert also faced a separate charge under UK law, causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult, since he was a member of the household during the period of Debbie's worsening condition.
In July of 2021, at a preliminary hearing, Elaine pled not guilty to the charge of unlawful killing. She was scheduled to stand trial at Preston Crown Court in early 2022. Robert also pled not guilty to his charges, and so a trial date was set for February of 2022. However, in December of 2021, Elaine changed her plea to guilty. She had finally admitted that her neglect had directly caused Debbie's death. Meanwhile, Robert never went to trial either. At the same hearing in late 2021, the Crown Prosecution Service decided to drop all charges against him. The exact reason was not explained, but it is speculated that the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to convict him. Then, on February 24th of 2022, Elaine appeared in the dock of the Preston Crown Court for her sentencing hearing. The details of Debbie's suffering were recounted in full detail before the judge, Justice Amanda Yip. Debbie's father, Tom, attended the sentencing. He had traveled from Hastings, and at one point, he broke down in tears as the judge reviewed what happened to his daughter. Elaine, on the other hand, showed little emotion in court. When given the chance to speak, she offered no real apology. She was ultimately sentenced to 9 years and 7 months in prison for the gross negligence manslaughter of her daughter. Under UK law, Elaine would be required to serve at least 2/3 of her sentence before becoming eligible for parole. With time served, she could be eligible for release around 2028. Many in the public and Debbie's family felt that the sentence was far too lenient. Tom openly criticized the outcome, asking if that's all his little girl's life was worth.
You know, why did she die? Like, why?
What was she like?
She was lovely. You know, she wouldn't that soul. You know, she used to love sitting in the mirror, brushing her hair. We'll never talk to her again, even if she's done her time. To us, she should have got life. last for a life, you know.
He met with his local member of parliament to push for a review of the sentence. The case was referred to the Attorney General under the unduly lenient sentence scheme, but the sentence was not increased. The court decided it fell within the acceptable range for manslaughter. Elaine was sent to a women's prison, likely His Majesty's Prison style, or another facility for female offenders in the Northwest. The case also prompted an independent safeguarding adults review, taken on by the Blackpool Safeguarding Adults Board, to look into what went wrong and to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. In the review, which used the pseudonym Jessica for Debbie, the findings were blunt. There had been missed opportunities across the board. Carers, social workers, and medical staff had been too willing to accept Elaine's explanation and her ability to play along. It concluded that Debbie's death had been avoidable if the warning signs had been acted upon sooner and more decisively.
Debbie's family in Hastings mourned in their own way. Tom, who was clearly heartbroken, kept fighting for justice in Debbie's name. He gave multiple interviews to the press, determined that the world recognized Debbie as more than just a victim by talking about her personality and her bright spirit, and I hope that we've done that justice in this video. Debbie's body was held for some time by the coroner and forensic authorities. It was eventually released to the family after the post-mortem and initial inquiries were completed. Debbie was cremated, and her father fought to be given some of her remains. In the end, he received half of Debbie's ashes. He decided to lay his portion of her ashes to rest in a place filled with personal meaning. He buried them beside his father, Debbie's grandfather. Years later, during a pre-inquest session on May 8, 2024 at Blackpool Town Hall, it was announced that Tom had passed away before the inquest could move forward. His absence was especially saddening considering how deeply he had sought answers about his daughter's death. The hearing also confirmed that Elaine had refused to take part in the proceedings. Though the court previously reached out and the prison was made aware of the inquest, Elaine had chosen not to be involved. The inquest, meant to look into the circumstances surrounding Debbie's final months, moved ahead without two of the most central figures, and unfortunately led to no real conclusions. But people did not forget about her. To mark 1 year since her passing in August of 2020, supporters online organized a Wave of Light vigil. People were asked to light a candle at a set time in Debbie's memory and post a photo of it. Dozens of photos of lit candles appeared on Facebook with messages like, "For Debbie, may you rest in peace." I think the first thing that needs to be said when talking about Debbie Leach's case is that many people wrongfully refer to this as a child neglect case, and I thought it was a child neglect case too. And I think that we're doing Debbie and other adult disabled victims a disservice if we don't talk about it for what it is, because some of the ways in which Debbie was taken advantage of related to the fact that she wasn't a child.
Right. So in normal cases, CPS might be involved in a situation like this with the child that has a disability. And I know, like in our comments, we'll probably get, where was CPS? Well, CPS is not going to be involved with it because it is adult.
She was 24 at the time of her death.
Yeah, she was 24. And in a lot of cases, unless some sort of complaint has been lodged, adult protective services are not going to be involved either.
Now
that makes sense.
Yes, and now this was a UK case, so there's some laws here that we might not be aware of, and if you know them better than us, please let us know in the comments. But I tie this back to Katarina Witten, who we covered recently, who other people thought was a child too when talking about it, or most notably Lacey Fletcher, who fused to the couch. That's how it was in the headlines. So if you remember that case, you probably remember it like that. Some people thought she was a child too when they first read about it. The thing that really strikes me, there's a lot of sad things here about Debbie, but when she was 23, she said to her father, "I want to live with you." And as an adult, you have the option to live wherever you want to. Now, I don't know in the UK if her being legally disabled barred her from having that option, but I would think that if she was able to put that forward to social services and knew how to speak out, and her dad knew the proper channels to go through, she very well would have been able to live with him.
Right, or even if she had the same opportunities that she had when she was in Leeds, whether she was still in her college programs, the day programs with all of her friends. At that point, even if she couldn't communicate well, she could at least communicate to somebody so that the wheels would be turning and they could get the ball rolling for her to do that.
Absolutely. And in most situations where an adult has to speak out, people would say, well, if you don't know, then that's on you. But this is a disabled adult. And because of that, somebody has to properly advocate for her and let her know she has those choices. I mean, she obviously could communicate well enough and had enough sense about her to be able to know I would rather live with my father. So I would hope that if she put that forward to somebody, that she would have gotten that option.
And a very interesting connection that I've noticed with a lot of the cases of people with disabilities we've covered recently is the frequency of which there's hoarding or insect infestations. So if we look back to Katarina Witten, there was cockroaches everywhere. She was being eaten by them, and she couldn't even see that she was being eaten by them. You know, late Lacey, there was like a rat infestation. She was getting bitten by rats. Christina Pengelengen, she was still a child, but there's bed bugs all over the house. Heather Baynard, that was a whole other situation with a lot of different filth going on. So it's very interesting. It makes you like wonder, like, you know, should adult protective services be involved just to check the welfare? And I know there's a lot of different hurdles with that. There is a chance that the government could use it to control whether people get benefits or not. And that's not what we're like advocating for, but just to make sure as a baseline that, you know, people are okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
With disabled children or children that are on social services, CPS's radar, there's supposed to be routine check-ins or proper consistent documentation. But it appears based on our research, especially these cases, if this is a disabled adult, that need for documentation and check-in is very little or doesn't exist at all. I would think that most people who are parents of disabled adults would do what is necessary for their disabled adult children, but this is where we find situations where they fall through the cracks. And, you know, again, we're in running this channel and with what cases people are recommending us, I'm seeing patterns that I didn't know were there before starting this channel. Right. I didn't know that there was this number of disabled adults that are being harmed or neglected and just falling through the cracks, and nobody knows anything about it until it's too late. And so it's like, what do we do for them? I don't know if I have any like quick, concrete answers for that.
I don't either. It's just extremely sad. And I think that there just needs to be some sort of oversight for that. And what's really depressing about this as well, on top of everything we've already discussed, I found this information out in post when we were finishing the editing up. Debbie's dad learned about her death via Facebook. Facebook.
And we found Emily Pike's case. Her mom found
same
out.
Situation.
Yeah, that was the first time I think I found or researched a case where a parent has to find out about their child's death through social media. And what a bizarre thing to even consider. You would think that wouldn't be the case. How we know of it is that the news can't even report on something like that until the family's notified. So why wouldn't that be the case here? And now within a span of like a month, we have found 2 cases where the parent finds out on social media. I can't imagine what it feels like to be a father and find out that way. And nobody have the decency to give you a call, especially a dad that wanted to do everything right for his daughter. Her dad was a victim of the fact that the courts felt that Elaine was a better fit caretaker for Debbie. And Tom, much to his credit, appealed the decision, explained and presented reasons why he felt she was an unfit mother and an unfit caretaker. And there comes a point where you as a parent fight and fight and fight, but at the end of the day, the courts will dictate what you're able to do. And unfortunately, that was the case for him. And my heart breaks for him. This is a case we've been watching very closely for the past few weeks, waiting for the result of the court trial. There are many people who have asked us for coverage on this, and I'm thankful to say that as of today, the absolute scum responsible have been brought to justice. This story is a prime example that the failures of Child Protective Services aren't just a problem here in America, but a problem that we see in many other areas of the world. I want to give a special shout out to Katie, who first brought this case to our attention, but without anything further, this is the heartbreaking story of Sarah Sharif.
Sarah Sharif was born on January 11, 2013 in Slough, County Berkshire, England, to parents Irfan Sharif and Olga Doman. Sarah had long brown hair, big brown eyes, and a sweet smile. She loved singing, dancing, and playing the guitar. Irfan was of Pakistani origin, but had moved to the UK on a student visa in 2003 to study business management in London. At the time of our story, he worked as a taxi driver. Olga was originally from Poland and spoke very little English. The pair met in Poland, and Irfan convinced Olga to come back to the UK with him. The couple married in 2009 and soon gave birth to Sarah's older brother a year later. As he's a minor, we'll be referring to him as Z throughout our story. Sarah also had another sibling born after Z that we'll refer to as U, although not a lot is known about them. Things didn't remain happy in the Sharif household for long. Irfan and Olga separated in 2015 and quickly divorced. Sarah and U originally resided with their mother, but in 2019, custody was awarded to Irfan. From there, they were whisked away. First, to a tiny 2-bedroom council flat in West Byfleet, then to a bigger semi-detached council house on Hammond Street in Horsell. There, Sarah and Yu lived with their new stepmother, 30-year-old Beenish Batul, Irfan's 29-year-old brother Faisal Malik, and 4 other children that the media described as belonging to the couple. Irfan had met Beenish after picking her up in his taxi while still married to Olga. Because Olga objected to her children being raised in the Muslim faith, her ex-husband cut off all contact. But in 2023, Sarah was allegedly bullied at school for wearing a hijab, after which she was pulled out of class and homeschooled by her stepmother. But we all know how that goes. And as we'll find out later in our story, it had nothing to do with bullying.
On August 9th, 2023, emergency services received a 999 call that was placed from Islamabad, Pakistan. On the call, a man confessed to the dispatchers that, "I've killed my daughter, and it wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much." He claimed that his actions were intended as punishment, coldly admitting, "I'm a cruel father." That man was Irfan Sharif, who had fled England with his wife, brother, and 5 surviving children. In the early morning hours of August 10th, Sarah's body was located at the family's Hammond Road address by the Surrey police. She had been placed underneath a blanket in her bunk bed. All of the adults in the home were immediately named persons of interest due to not only the 999 call, but a 3-page note that was left behind that read as follows: "I swear to God that my intention was not to kill her, but I lost it. My daughter is Muslim. Can you bury her like a Muslim, maybe? I will be back before you finish the post-mortem. Whoever sees this note, it's me, Irfan Sharif, who killed my daughter by beating. I am running away because I am scared, but I promise that I will hand over myself and take punishment. Love you, Sarah." At her autopsy 5 days later on August 15th, Sarah presented with numerous severe injuries that the medical examiner noted had been inflicted over time. The 10-year-old girl was covered in more than 70 separate injuries, which included human bite marks, scalds on her feet, bruises, a burn on her butt that was caused by placing a hot iron onto her skin, a broken hyoid bone, a puncture wound to the head, a traumatic brain injury, 11 spinal fractures, and other numerous injuries to her fingers, shoulder blades, and ribs. She also had injuries that showed evidence that Sarah had been restrained. It would later be revealed that Sarah had a hood placed over her head before being beaten with a metal pole and a cricket bat. There were so many injuries it was impossible to figure out which of them actually caused her death. On September 12, 2023, police raided a home in Jhelum, Punjab, Pakistan, belonging to Irfan's father. There, they were able to locate Irfan's 5 surviving children who were unharmed and subsequently placed into foster care. On September 13th, all 3 adults were arrested at London's Gatwick Airport after flying back home by way of Sialkot and Dubai. It should be noted that there is no official extradition agreement in place between the United Kingdom and Pakistan.
On September 14th, Irfan Sharif, Binish Batul, and Faisal Malik were arrested and charged with the murder, along with an additional charge of causing or allowing the death of a child. When Binish was interviewed by the police, she didn't have a ton of useful things to say.
Please, could you introduce yourself? What's your name?
So my name is Binish Batul.
And you are about to be interviewed for the offence of murder. What's your understanding of murder? What's your understanding of that offence?
Killing someone.
Yeah. Okay, so it's intentionally killing somebody. Okay, in very simple terms. Okay, that's the offence for which you've been arrested for, and that's the offence for which we're going to speak to you about. All right. What happened to Sarah?
No comment.
What did you see?
No comment.
Whose choice was it? How you left Sarah?
No comment.
You know, Dawn's just said, as you said in the video, you want to come back to the UK, clear your name in the UK courts. Well, here we are. This is the start of the process. So why would you not speak to us now?
No comment.
Who did that to Sarah?
No comment.
Do you love Sarah?
No comment.
Did you care about her at all?
No comment.
According to Irfan's father, Mohammed Sharif, as a stepmother, Binish Batul's behavior was not good with Sarah, and she always used to scold her constantly. Sarah had complained to Irfan about Batul's behavior, and she, Batul, denied it and said the children are lying. They all remained in custody ahead of the hearings at both the Guildford Magistrates Court and London's Old Bailey via video conference. In December of 2023, all 3 adults pled not guilty to all charges. The jury was sworn in on October 8, 2024, with the trial beginning shortly thereafter. On October 14th, the prosecution shared with the court the 999 call that Irfan placed after landing in Pakistan, claiming that he legally punished his daughter. We'll play that for you now.
Sorry, please, how can I help?
Hello?
Hello, how can I help?
Oh, Dad, I couldn't stand. Can you write on my address, please?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hello? Is everything okay?
Hello, can you... Nothing is okay. Can you write on my address, please?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Can you write down my address,
Okay,
please?
what's your postcode?
GU21
Yep.
4TQ.
Tango, Quebec. Okay, what's happened? What number? What number?
Number 6.
Okay. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and tell me what's happened.
I cannot. I physically punished my daughter and she died. I left home in a panic. God, she is allowed at home.
I need you to take a breath because I cannot understand what you're saying, okay? Your daughter has died.
I killed my daughter. I killed my daughter.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, hello?
Can you go to number 6, the Hammond Road, please?
Okay, don't worry.
Nobody's at home. Hello?
Hello, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here.
Can you send someone there? I left my front door keys under the front mat.
Okay.
My daughter is dead. Panic, I left her.
Who's killed your daughter?
It's me.
Okay.
Father.
How?
I said she was naughty. I physically just died.
I'm going to need you to slow down, okay? How have you killed your daughter?
I beat her up. It wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much.
Okay, where is your daughter now?
She's number 6, Hammond Road.
Where are you?
I'm left the property. I'm gonna come back.
Okay. What's your name? What is your name?
My name is Irfan Sharif.
Can you spell that for me?
It's U for umbrella.
Mhm.
R for Romeo.
Yep.
A for Freddy, A for Alpha, and for November.
Sorry, you are.
FAN.
Okay, second name, please.
Sharif, F for Sugar, H for Hotel, A for Alpha, R for Romeo, I for Indigo, F for Freddy.
Brilliant. Can I get your date of birth?
Sorry, my
Date
date of birth is 25/11/81. Hello.
Hello, I'm still here. I'm just writing all of this down.
Can you send someone? My daughter is in love.
Yes.
Please,
Yes, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Nothing's going to be slowed down, okay? What is your... Okay,
I'm gonna hand over myself.
okay, I need you to slow down, okay? What is your daughter's name?
Sara Sharif.
Okay, I need you to slow down. Okay, how do you spell your daughter's name?
SARA.
S-A-R-A.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh. And Sharif's surname SHARIF.
Okay, what's her date of birth?
Oh. It's 11th of January 2013. She's only 10 years old. Oh my God.
2000 and what?
13. Oh.
Okay, what happened? What led to this all happening?
Actually, she was naughty over the last 3-4 weeks, and I was giving her punishment that she to sort her out. And yes, I did something and she died.
Was she breathing when you left?
No, she was not. I tried to resuscitate her, tried to give her CPR, everything, but I failed. I left in panic.
Okay. Was she bleeding anywhere?
No.
Okay.
She's dead, I'm telling you.
What injuries did she sustain? How long ago was this? How long ago? When did this happen? I need you to listen to me, okay? When did this happen?
About 36 hours ago.
This happened 36 hours ago?
Yes. I'm a cruel father.
Where are you right now?
I'm not alone. I'm gonna come back.
So you're driving right now?
I'm driving. I'll come back.
Okay. What is your registration number?
I left my.
Okay.
It's L for Lima, R for Romeo.
Yep.
57 Freddy Victor Charlie.
What sort of car is it?
It's BMW X5. I left that at Heathrow car park, Terminal 3, on the top floor.
Sorry, what was that?
My car is at Terminal 3, short.
Sorry, what car are you in right now, if you're not driving your car?
I'm in someone else's car. Please, I'll come back. Could you please send someone there?
No, don't worry. We are already deployed. This is not slowing any of this down, okay? Whose car are you in?
I'm in someone else's car.
Whose car are you in, though?
It's someone else's car. Please, I'll come.
Is anyone else at the home with your daughter?
No one's at home. It's just me. No one is at home.
Okay. Do you know the... Yeah, don't worry. We're already sending officers on the way. Okay. Do you know the registration for the car that you're driving?
No.
Whose car is it?
I don't. It's my friend's car. I'm not around. Could you please go there? I'll get back to you soon. I'll hand over myself. I'll come to Woking police station.
No, you need to go back to the address now. Okay? You need to go back to the address.
I will.
Okay? So where are you? I know you said you're driving, but can you see a road? Where are you right now?
I cannot give more details. I promise I'll come back. I'll I'll face the justice.
I need to know where you are. Okay? Give me a landmark. Give me anything. Where are you? Do you know what town you're in?
I don't know.
Okay? So if you live in Woking, are you driving through Guildford? Are you driving through West Byfleet? Are you driving through Aldershot? Where are you driving right now?
At the trial, the gloves came off, with Benish's lawyer, Caroline Carberry, claiming that Irfan had a sham marriage with Olga because she was Polish and thus a member of the EU. Attorney Carberry inferred that Irfan was targeting Polish women because he was looking for a pathway to European citizenship. In fact, according to Benish, Irfan had gotten married to a second Polish woman at some point, took her passport, and locked her up. Thankfully, she escaped. On December 11, 2024, both Irfan Sharif and Benish Batul were found guilty on all counts. Faisal Malik was found not guilty on the charge of murder, but was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. On December 17th, they were back in court for sentencing. There, Sarah's mother Olga shared the following victim impact statement with the court. Sarah was always smiling. She had her own unique character. The only thing I had left to give my daughter was to give her a beautiful Catholic funeral that she deserves. She is now an angel who looks down on us from heaven. She is no longer experiencing violence. To this day, I can't understand how someone can be such a sadist to a child. Addressing her ex-husband and his new wife, she said, "You are sadists, although even this word is not enough for you. I would say you are executioners." Justice Kavanaugh condemned the pair for not showing a shred of remorse and described Sarah's treatment as nothing short of torture. The full video is over 49 minutes long and is available to view in our show notes. We'll play a portion for you now.
The marks were consistent with restraints being used, in other words, with Sarah being tied up. Many of these injuries had tramline markings, which show that she had been beaten with an elongated object. You, Irfan Sharif, have admitted to beating Sarah on a number of occasions with a metal pole, part of a high chair. The pole was found at the property after Sarah's death. You also admitted to beating Sarah with a cricket bat, which was also found at the property. At one stage you admitted to doing this multiple times, but then you changed your evidence, would only admit to doing so once. I have no doubt that in fact this was a regular occurrence. In addition to the 71 fresh injuries, the medical experts found a total of 25 separate fractures to the bones in Sarah's body. These included a fractured collarbone, 2 fractured shoulder blades, fractured ribs, a fractured humerus, 11 separate fractures to her spinal column, and fractures to bones in both of her hands. This is not a case of a single episode of maltreatment, therefore. This poor child was battered with great force again and again. Some of the injuries require special mention because they demonstrate the almost unbelievable torture to which Sarah was subjected in the last weeks of her life. The medical experts identified a fracture in the hyoid bone in Sarah's neck. This is a very unusual injury and was the result of very vigorous and energetic manual strangulation, quite possibly on more than one different occasion. Sarah sustained a serious brain injury a few days before she died as the result of a blow to her head. In addition, when she died, Sarah had open burn wounds on the bones of the inside of each ankle. The only possible explanation for this, as is made clear by the medical evidence, is that Sarah's ankles were tied and then either her feet were wrapped around a hot pipe or, more likely, boiling water was poured on her ankles. Once again, the wounds had not been treated and no medical help had been sought for Sarah. The post-mortem investigation showed that Sarah had 6 bite marks on her body. 5 of them were on her left arm and 1 was on the inside of her left thigh. The marks were made by an adult. You, Irfan Sharif and Faisal Malik, and Sarah's older brother, each provided teeth impressions and each was excluded from being responsible for the tooth marks. You, Benash Batul, declined to give a tooth impression, and the only possible inference is that it was you who made these bite marks. Though the bite marks were not in themselves fatal injuries, the fact that you were prepared to assault Sarah in this way provides an insight into the extent to which you were complicit in and comfortable with the abuse that Sarah was suffering. But the medical and forensic evidence does not stop there. It is absolutely clear that in the last few weeks of her life, Sarah was tied up. She was trussed up with masking tape and with skipping rope. Even worse, she was hooded. Plastic bags were put over her head, which were then held in place with masking tape, and a hole was ripped in the plastic bag through which she could breathe. This treatment of a 10-year-old child is nothing short of gruesome. It is hard to imagine how terrifying it must have been for Sarah, especially as the treatment was at the hands of her own parents.
In the end, Justice Kavanaugh sentenced Irfan Sharif to a minimum term of 40 years in prison, Benash Batul to 33 years in prison, and Faisal Malik to 16 years. Libby Clark from the Crown Prosecution Service shared the following words after the sentencing. Sarah Sharif was a lively and joyful 10-year-old girl whose life was tragically cut short by the very people who should have protected and cared for her. The evidence in this case painted a devastating picture of the suffering Sarah experienced leading up to her death, and the campaign of abuse she was being subjected to in her own family home. Her injuries revealed the extent of the cruelty inflicted upon her, while the defendant's actions after her death demonstrated a shocking disregard for her life as they attempted to flee the country to evade justice, thinking only of themselves. Whilst her father and stepmother were responsible for subjecting Sarah to horrific abuse, her uncle took no action to stop or report it. This has been an incredibly complex and distressing case, and it is thanks to the tireless work of the prosecution team, Surrey Police, international partners, and the CPS International Unit that we were able to secure justice for Sarah. I also want to thank the jury for their careful consideration of the harrowing evidence presented in court. Today's sentences reflect the cruelty and gravity of their crimes, and while no sentence can bring Sarah back, we hope this outcome is able to provide some small comfort to all those that knew and loved her. But long before Sarah's tragic death, there were clues to Irfan's violent past that could potentially save Sarah's life if the complaints were taken seriously. In fact, before Sarah was even born, the police and social services were already a part of the family's lives. Records indicate that between 2010 and 2012, there were already 4 calls to the couple's home for reports of family violence. In 2010, Surrey County Council Children's Services became involved due to reports of violence and neglect directed at Sarah's older brother Z. That same year, Z was found abandoned in a shop. Also that same year, Irfan was arrested for assaulting both Olga and Z. He hit the little boy so hard that he left a handprint on his back. In 2011, reports alleged that Z told his teachers that his father hit him. Following year, he claimed that it was his mother. He was found with burn marks on his body, and once again, he was abandoned out on his own. This time, he was located at Woking Town Center, wandering around a half a mile from his home. Social workers noted additional injuries on Z's body, as well as on Yu's body, who had been born by this time. They also noted that the children's bedrooms lacked light bulbs and bedding. In 2013, Z suffered a very familiar burn. Been burned by a hot clothes iron, much like Sarah would be years later. When Sarah was born that same year, she was immediately placed under a care order. This gave the police and social services legal responsibility for the 3 children in the Sharif home. In November of 2014, Sarah and her siblings were briefly placed in the foster care after her brother Z claimed to have been bitten by his mother and pinched and punched by his father. Although Olga and Irfan claimed there were chickenpox scars, the foster parents noticed cigarette burns on both Sarah and Yu. In 2015, both Irfan and Olga were in court for a custody hearing. Olga accused Irfan of beating her and the kids and claimed that he was violent and controlling. Although it was never mandated, Irfan agreed to take part in family violence courses and counseling. It should be noted that prior to Irfan even meeting Olga, he was accused of intimate partner violence and false imprisonment by 2 separate ex-girlfriends, one in 2007 and one in 2009. It is unclear if either of these partners were the imprisoned Polish women we mentioned previously, but it is alleged that one of these ex-girlfriends was a minor. In total, Irfan had been arrested on at least 5 separate occasions for his behavior. That same year, Sarah and Yu returned home to the family and Z remained in foster care. According to the BBC, as he never went back home with Irfan and Olga. Sarah was in foster care once more in 2015 after Olga left Irfan, alleging that there was family violence. It was around this time that the couple separated for good, and Sarah began living with her mother full-time. Due to his history, Irfan was only allowed supervised visits. Everything seemed to calm down for the family up until Easter of 2019. It was then that Sarah confessed to Irfan that her mother had been hurting her. She told her father that Olga had tried to burn her with a lighter, had slapped her, pinched her, pulled her hair, and tried to drown her. Irfan videotaped this confession and submitted it to social services. It is unclear if this confession was coached. In October of 2019, custody of both Sarah and Yu were awarded to Irfan and his new wife, Beenish, despite his 5 arrests and previous police and social services involvement. It should be noted that the judge that awarded custody to Irfan was the same judge that had taken part in all of the Sharif family hearings from 2013 to 2015, and was well aware of the type of man that Irfan was.
By January of 2023, Sarah began wearing a hijab to school to try to hide her bruises, but it didn't work. By March, mandated reporters were making calls to social services, but sadly, the case was dropped in a matter of mere days. The following month, Beenish pulled Sarah out of school, and the violence only intensified in the last weeks of her life. She was forced to take care of all of the younger children and treated as a maid in her own home. Sarah was singled out for being a girl, Olga's girl. She was smart, sassy, feisty, and spirited. She wasn't submissive like Irfan wanted her to be, and she stood up to him. Sarah was referred 15 times to social services in the course of her lifetime, but sadly, it wasn't enough to save her life.
Sarah was a brave, feisty, and spirited child. She was not submissive as you wanted her to be. She stood up to you. You considered that her behaviour entitled you to chastise her physically, and I have no doubt that your ego and sense of self-importance were boosted by the power that you wielded over her and the rest of the family.
Back in November, we discussed the tragic case of Sarah Sharif. If you're not familiar with her story, we'll link the episode in the description in the pinned comment for you. We'll give you a short recap before we get into the many updates that have taken place since we released our episode. Sarah was a beautiful 10-year-old girl from the town of Woking in the UK. She was born on January 11th, 2013 to parents Irfan Sharif and Olga Doman and was of Polish and Pakistani heritage. Her parents ultimately divorced and Irfan gained custody of Sarah and her siblings and ended up in a council house in Horsell with Irfan's new wife Beenish Batul and his brother Faisal Malik. On August 9th, 2023, Irfan phoned emergency services in the UK to let them know that he had killed Sarah because, in his own words, she was naughty. He claimed that it wasn't his intention to kill her, he had just beat her up too much. At the time he placed the call, he and his whole family fled to Islamabad, Pakistan. His wife, Beenish Batul, made all of the travel arrangements.
All right, let's go. So where in Pakistan you want to go, ma'am?
Islamabad.
Yeah. And from which airport?
And whichever one it is.
Okay. Your travel dates, please.
Early as possible tomorrow.
Hotel stay. And return? A single.
Single.
Okay. And how many passengers will be traveling?
So, 4 adults and 4 kids.
Yeah, so here, ma'am, you have an option with Oman Air tomorrow night from Heathrow via Muscat to Islamabad.
What time?
8:50 at night, tomorrow night. Any flight available in the morning?
Is there anything in the morning?
Just a minute.
The following morning, Sarah's body was recovered by the Surrey police. She had been placed in her bunk bed and hidden beneath a blanket. In addition to admitting to dispatchers that he was indeed the killer, Irfan also left a note behind that read,
I swear to God that my intention was not to kill her, but I lost it. My daughter is Muslim. Can you bury her like a Muslim maybe? I will be back before you finish the post-mortem. Whoever sees this note, it's me, Irfan Sharif, who killed my daughter by beating. I am running away because I am scared, but but I promise that I will hand over myself and take punishment. Love you, Sarah. Sarah's autopsy told a different story. Irfan may have said he loved his daughter, but when you read the report, I feel it becomes very difficult for Irfan to say he truly loved his daughter. The 10-year-old girl was covered in more than 70 separate injuries, which included human bite marks, scalds on her feet, bruises, a burn on her butt that was caused by placing a hot iron onto her skin, a broken hyoid bone, a puncture wound to the head, a traumatic brain injury, 11 spinal fractures, and other numerous injuries to her fingers, shoulder blades, and ribs. She also had injuries that showed evidence that Sarah had been restrained and tortured over time. It would later be revealed that Sarah had a hood placed over her head before being beaten with a metal pole and a cricket bat. There were so many injuries that it was actually impossible for examiners to figure out which of them actually caused her death. Sarah's own father, Irfan Sharif, fully admitted that he was chiefly the one who tied Sarah up, put a hood over her head, and beat her with a metal pole that was broken off of a high chair, as well as a cricket bat. Irfan originally admitted to police that he had done this multiple times as a form of discipline, but he later recanted his statement, changing his story to saying it only happened one time. British High Court Justice John Kavanagh called this fact out during Irfan's sentencing.
The marks were consistent with restraints being used, in other words, with Sarah being tied up. Many of these injuries had tramline markings, which show that she had been beaten with an elongated object. You, Irfan Sharif, have admitted to beating Sarah on a number of occasions with a metal pole, part of a high chair. The pole was found at the property after Sarah's death. You also admitted to beating Sarah with a cricket bat, which was also found at the property. At one stage you admitted to doing this multiple times, but then you changed your evidence, would only admit to doing so once. I have no doubt that in fact this was a regular occurrence, at least towards the end. You also admitted to hitting her on the head with a mobile phone.
Now let us be clear here, as much as Irfan would like us to believe that he only did this once in a fit of rage, the evidence shows this clearly is not the case. And even if it was true, this isn't as simple as raising your hand against a child in anger. This is somebody tying somebody up, getting a bag to place over her head so he didn't have to look at her, and beating her multiple times with a metal pole and a cricket bat. For those in the States that don't know what a cricket bat is, we will put one on screen for you to see. This is not something you accidentally do without thinking. This is a calculated and deliberate act, and Irfan Sharif did this multiple times. It would not shock me if this was the act that was the final straw for Sarah. Again, maybe Irfan in his twisted mind believed that he loved his daughter, but I think we can all agree there was anything but love taking place in this household, especially when you add Sarah's stepmother, Binish Batul, and Sarah's uncle, Faisal Malik, to the mix. Remember the bite marks we mentioned on Sarah's body? There were 6 in total. 5 of these were on her arm, and the 6th was on the inside of her left thigh. Based on the size of these bite marks, there was no question that an adult was the one who was responsible, so the police were determined to find out who among these 3 was deranged enough to bite a 10-year-old girl as a form of punishment. So teeth impressions were requested from each of the 3 perpetrators, as well as from Sarah's older brother, purely to rule him out. Both Irfan Sharif and Faisal Malik submitted impressions, and both were confirmed to not be the ones responsible for the bite marks on Sarah. Binish Batul, however, refused to submit hers. Therefore, without any other suspects, it can be inferred that it was Binish who, for whatever sick reason, thought biting her stepdaughter was an acceptable way to discipline her. British High Court Justice John Kavanagh felt this was more than enough evidence to implicate Binish, and made that very clear during her sentencing.
The post-mortem investigation showed that Sarah had 6 bite marks on her body. 5 of them were on her left arm and 1 was on the inside of her left thigh. The marks were made by an adult. You, Irfan Sharif and Faisal Malik, and Sarah's older brother, each provided teeth impressions, and each was excluded from being responsible for the tooth marks. You, Binish Batul, declined to give a tooth impression, and the only possible inference is that it was you who made these bite marks. Though the bite marks were not in themselves fatal injuries, the fact that you were prepared to assault Sarah in this way provides an insight into the extent to which you were complicit in and comfortable with the abuse that Sarah was suffering.
On September 12, 2023, police raided a home in Jhelum, Punjab, Pakistan, belonging to Irfan's father. There, they were able to locate Irfan's 5 surviving children who were unharmed, thankfully, and subsequently placed into foster care. On September 13th, all 3 adults were arrested at London's Gatwick Airport after flying back home by way of Sialkot in Dubai. September 14th, Irfan Sharif, Beenish Batul, and Faisal Malik were arrested and charged with murder, along with an additional charge of causing or allowing the death of a child. Now, when we released our first episode on Sarah's case, we included this following clip that led to a lot of discussion in the comment section, basically because Beenish kept saying no comment over and over again. We are fully aware that no comment is the equivalent of pleading the fifth here in the United States. What was curious to us, however, is that she couldn't even say that she loves Sarah, her own stepdaughter. Sure, maybe she's just following what her lawyer advised her to do, but I truly have a hard time imagining how saying that you loved and cared about your stepdaughter could be something so incriminating. Maybe we have some legal experts in the comments who could share their thoughts, because I'd certainly love to know. Either way, we'll share that clip with you now just so you can see what we're referring to.
Please, could you introduce yourself? What's your name?
So my name is Beenish Batul.
And you are about to be interviewed for the offence of murder. What's your understanding of murder? What's your understanding of that offence?
Killing someone.
Yeah. Okay, so it's intentionally killing somebody. Okay, in very simple terms. Okay, that's the offence for which you've been arrested for, and that's the offence for which we're going to speak to you about. All right. What happened to Sarah?
No comment.
What did you see?
No comment.
Whose choice was it? How you left Sarah?
No comment.
You know, Dawn's just said, as you said in the video, you want to come back to the UK, clear your name in the UK courts. Well, here we are. This is the start of the process. So why would you not speak to us now?
No comment.
Who did that to Sarah?
No comment.
Do you love Sarah?
No comment.
Did you care about her at all?
No comment.
On December 11th, 2024, both Irfan Sharif and Beenish Batul were found guilty on all counts. Faisal Malik was found not guilty on the charge of murder, but was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. After the verdict, the police held the following press conference.
Good afternoon, everyone. Much closer? Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Craig Emerson, Detective Chief Inspector for Surrey Police. I've been the Senior Investigating Officer for this investigation. Today, after a 10-week trial, a jury has found Irfan Sharif and Beenish Batul, the father and stepmother of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, guilty of her murder. Faisal Malik, Sarah's uncle, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Sarah was a bright and lively little girl who loved singing and dancing, and on behalf of Surrey Police, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to her mother Olga, her siblings, and all those who knew and cared for her. Sarah's spirit and bravery and resilience in the face of the suffering that she endured has shone through from the vast inquiries that have been undertaken in this case. Sarah's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent. This case has shocked and horrified not only those who knew and loved her, but people across the country and around the world. On the 10th of August 2023, we received a phone call from Sarah's father in which he told the operator that his daughter had died as a result of his actions. From this day, Surrey Police has worked tirelessly to build a case to prove that Sharif, Batul and Malik all played their part in Sarah's death. During the trial, Sharif took the stand intending to blame Sarah's death entirely on his wife before changing his story to accept some responsibility while still denying murder. Batul and Malik refused to take the stand at all, or provide any explanation what happened to Sarah in their police interviews. All 3 defendants have only ever sought to preserve their own interests throughout this investigation and have shown no remorse for their truly dreadful behaviour. Sarah's death has been one of the most difficult and distressing cases that Surrey Police has ever dealt with. I would like to thank those who came forward to provide information and those who gave evidence in such harrowing circumstances. I would like to thank the jury for their careful consideration of the evidence which has been presented throughout the trial. The murder of a child is absolutely shocking, but the horrific nature of the abuse Sarah suffered during her short life has made this case particularly disturbing. Today, justice for Sarah has been served, and our thoughts remain with Sarah's mother and her siblings at this extremely difficult time. Thank you very much.
What must it have been like that child?
Thank you.
Over the last month?
At the heart of this trial was Sarah Sharif, a happy, outgoing and lively 10-year-old girl who was cruelly abused and murdered by the two people closest to her. We have all seen Sarah's smile shine out from the photos of her, but everyone involved with this case will always remember that utterly horrendous injuries and brutal treatment she received in the weeks leading up to her death. We cannot begin to imagine the suffering she went through in her own family home. Both defendants denied killing Sarah. However, the appalling truth is that they, along with Faisal Malik, were all living in a small house and were all complicit in what was happening to Sarah. The evidence given by some of the neighbours of the family highlighted their concerns about what was going on behind closed doors, yet none of the defendants did anything to stop or report the abuse that led to Sarah's tragic death. It has been a painstaking operation by Surrey Police and the Crown Prosecution Service to build this case and be able to prove to the jury that Irfan Sharif and Bainash Batul were both responsible for Sarah's murder. By showing they were there in the run-up to Sarah's death, we were able to prove that both of them played their part in killing her. This case was complicated further by the fact that all three defendants fled the country to Pakistan, and our CPS International unit played a significant role in helping us to prosecute this case successfully.
On December 17th, Justice Kavanaugh sentenced Irfan Sharif to a minimum term of 40 years in prison, Bainash Batul to 33 years in prison, and Faisal Malik to 16 years. Sarah's mother, Olga Doman, and her grandmother sat down with the Guardian to talk about what it was like identifying Sarah's body.
Brali piżamkę w myszkamiki, miała kołodrę dziecięcą przykrytą, ale żadna matka nie powinna oglądać takiego czegoś. Miała policzek napuchnięty, z drugiej strony miała siniaki. Do tej pory, jak zamykam oczy, to widzę, jak moje dziecko wyglądało.
To nie była Sara. Całkiem zmieniona, posiniaczona. Gdyby mi ktoś nie powiedział, że to jest Sara, to bym w życiu nie uwierzył.
There's a lot more to share about the history of this case and Irfan's behavior, but we've done a whole episode on that, which again, we'll link for you down below. Now we're going to get to the updates in the case that have come out since the 3 adults were sentenced last month.
So according to the BBC, The Guardian, and many other news outlets, pretty soon after Irfan and company were jailed, their fellow inmates decided to exact their own form of prison justices as a revenge for Sarah. On New Year's Day of 2025 at London's Belmarsh prison, 2 inmates took it upon themselves to attack Irfan in his cell with a piece of a tuna can. He suffered cuts to his face and received medical treatment at the prison hospital and survived the attack.
The killer dad of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif is terrified of returning to his prison cell after he was slashed in the neck and face with the jagged lid of a tin of tuna. Irfan Sharif, who was ambushed by 2 inmates, fears others could target him in further attacks. 43-year-old Sharif was assaulted on New Year's Day and then treated in the healthcare unit of Belmarsh Prison in South London. Justice sources have today told The Sun he may now have to be segregated for his own safety. However, Sharif, who was given a 40-year minimum term for the murder of Sarah, cannot be kept away from other inmates indefinitely. And one source told us, Sharif is terrified and now fears other attacks. He is not yet back on the wing and will be in no rush to return.
Now, a big question that came up in the comments was if canned goods were actually allowed in prisons, because that seemed to be a bit of a security issue. Some folks even believed it to be fake news because they've never heard of such a thing. Since neither of us have ever been to prison and couldn't tell you if canned goods are allowed, we decided to reach out to our good friend Google for an answer. We actually found a couple of different answers, so it looks like this depends on where you're from. One source indicated that yes, canned goods are typically allowed in US prisons, but there are some restrictions. Canned goods must be commercially packaged, airtight, and hermetically sealed. They must also not require any cooking. Other restrictions indicate that canned goods must be 16 ounces or less and cannot be in glass containers. Beverages must be in cans, pouches, or boxes and are no larger than 32 ounces. Meats must be pre-cooked, cured, smoked, or cold cut. Seafood must be cooked, cured, or smoked and without shells. The food items in question can be purchased at the prison commissary and, for states that allow it, brought in during a visit. Now, according to the gov.uk website, which is most important in this case since it took place in the UK, inmates are indeed allowed tin food items that are to be kept at designated places specific by the prison administration. So for those listening outside of the UK, Belmarsh Prison is classified as a Category A jail and is located in southwest London. According to some sources, the prison has been described as Britain's Guantanamo Bay. This is due to the long-term detention of terrorism suspects without charge. It's said to house some of the most dangerous prisoners in the nation, so I don't think it comes as a surprise that some of them might have taken issue with Irfan and what he was there for. Belmarsh, or Hellmarsh as it's known to inmates, is also the home of grinder killer Stephen Port, whom we covered many years ago. We'll be sure to link that case for you as well if you're interested in some of our older episodes. Before we go on making Irfan's attacker a hero, we should probably talk about who he is and exactly what he's in Belmarsh for. Irfan was attacked by 45-year-old Stephen Sansom, who murdered a 38-year-old woman named Sarah Mayhew. He and his co-defendant, 49-year-old Gemma Watts, then proceeded to dismember the woman with power tools and dispose of her body in various locations around southwest London. Some of her remains were recovered in a park in Croydon by a dog walker, while others were recovered from the River Wandle. It's unclear how Miss Mayhew was killed, but at autopsy, it was discovered that she had bruising to her skull, 2 fractures to 2 vertebrae near her voice box, and had her head shaved. Stephen pled guilty to murder as well as perverting the course of justice. He pled not guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. However, this wasn't even the first time Stephen had killed someone. On Christmas Eve of 1998, he stabbed taxi driver Terrence Boyle in the throat. Mr. Boyle, who was a father of 2 children, staggered to a nearby house for help, but died on the doorsteps. Stephen was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison and was released in December of 2019, barely having served his minimum sentence. So although Stephen did what a lot of you would like to do to Irfan, he is still clearly an evil person. But this isn't the only update that's come across our desks. There's actually 2 more we've learned about just this week. Being in the US, it can be difficult to keep up to date with the news going on in the UK, especially if it's an emerging case or didn't make international headlines. Again, we have to thank our friend Katie over in the UK for keeping us abreast of the situation as it unfolds across the pond.
On January 20th, the BBC posted an article indicating that the Solicitor General decided to appeal Irfan Sharif's sentence. Now, for those unfamiliar with what that is, a Solicitor General oversees all civil and criminal appeals to ensure quality and consistency and becomes personally involved in selected cases. There's more to it, but this is the simplest explanation we can give. The current Solicitor General in the UK is Lucy Rigby, who was appointed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, an appeal might make you initially have cause for concern, and that's understandable because here in the US, this normally means the accused is trying to overturn their sentence. However, that's not what's happening here. Lucy Rigby actually found that Irfan's sentence of 40 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole to be too lenient for what he did. I think many are in agreement here. I personally would be quite happy if Irfan Sharif never saw the light of day again. She referred the case to the Court of Appeal, and according to a spokesperson for the Attorney General's office, it is now for the court to decide whether to increase the sentence. Irfan himself is also attempting to appeal a sentence, and a court date has yet to be set for either appeal. In other news, an appeal was won to name Sarah Sharif's family court judges. This was announced on the BBC on January 24th. The family court judges in question are the ones who gave Irfan Sharif full custody of Sarah in October of 2019. This is the same judge who had overseen the family hearings from 2013 to 2015. The The judge in question was fully aware of Irfan's 5 prior arrests and his history of violence. The court was also aware at the time of multiple romantic partners, further alleging that Irfan had falsely imprisoned them in addition to his violent behavior. According to the news source, Mr. Justice Williams ruled in December that the media could not name the judges involved in the historical family court cases related to the 10-year-old, as well as social workers and guardians, due to a real risk of harm from a virtual lynch mob. This might sound strange, as judges aren't normally provided anonymity in any of the cases we've covered, but according to the BBC, the judges had concerns given the often inflammatory nature of public and media commentary. However, the BBC and other news outlets weren't satisfied with that, nor should they have been, and they managed to appeal that decision in the interest of transparency. As of the 24th, the Court of Appeals ruled that the unnamed judges must be revealed within 7 days. It's been noted that 2 of the 3 judges have conveniently retired in this time. According to Sir Geoffrey Voss, who is the Master of the Rolls in England and Wales, in the circumstances of this case, the judge had no jurisdiction to anonymize the historic judges either on 9 December 2024 or thereafter. He was wrong to do so.
We're going to keep an eye out for updates as they become available. I don't think this is a if they become available situation, because look how many updates have come out in just 1 month. Now, here in the States, it's rare for a case in the UK to be so easily accessible. We've both had people who aren't interested in true crime bring up Sarah's story with us. So with this being such a high-profile story, it's very unlikely that it will fade into obscurity like so many murders we've covered. At the very least, we'll know in about a week the names of the judges involved, and we'll probably post some sort of update when that information is brought to light. We don't normally do update episodes like this, but we made an exception because of the number of requests we received to make one. So let us know if this is something you'd like to see more of going forward. But until then, we love you and stay safe out there. Hey everyone, we don't normally post an update after the fact, but as of today, January 31st, 2025, the judges involved in the Sharif family court proceedings have been named, and they are Judges Allison Rayside, Peter Nathan, and Sally Williams. Now, Peter Nathan and Sally Williams have since retired, but Allison Rayside, who dealt with the majority of the hearings relating to Sarah, including allowing both Sarah and her siblings to remain in their parents' care, remains an active judge. Lola Patricia James was born in Wales on September 30th, 2017 to parents Sinead James and Daniel Thomas. She had an older sister born in March of 2014 and a baby sister born in May of 2019. Lola's maternal grandmother, Nicola James, said the toddler had big, sparkly eyes and soft blonde curls, and that she gave the best hugs. She had an open smile and sometimes wore her hair in short pigtails tied with a bow. Though she was shy around strangers, her family said she was feisty, outgoing, and bold. Nicola called Lola her cheeky monkey, who grew into a charming, smiley, bubbly, mischievous little girl. Her grandmother recounted a time that captures the cheeky side of Lola's personality. She had asked to paint her fingernails and was told no, but that didn't stop the determined toddler. A few minutes later, there was bright red nail polish on her feet, ankles, all over her hands. It was everywhere. Though it was likely a bit of work to clean it all up, Nicola says she smiles when she remembers how independent Lola could be. Lola loved dancing, singing, and playing with her dollhouse. She and her big sister sometimes stayed up late pretending to be the princesses in Frozen. She loved the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and her favorite snack was Monster Munch corn chips. Her father Daniel said even as a toddler, she loved the outdoors and everything there, the birds, bees, and butterflies. She loved eating homegrown strawberries and apples from her grandmother's garden and going on butterfly hunts. Her grandmother said she was happiest when she was caked in mud, getting into her shorts and wellies. Her father described her as bright as the golden sun. She was beautiful, charming, and cheeky. Her laugh would fill the room with pure joy. Sinead and Daniel's relationship was over not long after it started. He was described as a loving and attentive parent to Lola from a distance, but he wasn't involved in Sinead's life after Lola was born.
Sinead, her daughters, and the family dog lived in a single-family home in Haverfordwest, a small town in the southwest of Wales. Visitors to her home described it as sometimes messy and smelly, with diapers and clothes all over the place. Pictures of the bedroom that the girls shared showed cheerful wallpaper and pink curtains, but also a mess of clothes and toys strewn everywhere, with an empty soda can and old popsicle sticks among the clutter. After Daniel, Sinead got into another relationship, but he was a violent man and it did not end well. A DV incident occurred in her home and he was reported, and Sinead stopped seeing him. Now, much like a report of DV in the United States might trigger a CPS investigation, in Wales, the local branch of the National Health Services was notified. The Hywel Health Board submitted a multi-agency referral in an effort to get mental health and other services to Sinead and her girls. The agency didn't release her prior records, but did say the local authority had significant involvement with the family over the years.
In January 2020, health visitor Leslie Stedman met with her at her home and discussed her situation. Now, health visitors do some of the work that a caseworker might do in the States. Leslie's job was to evaluate the cleanliness and safety of her home, write a report, and refer for services. Sinead identified herself as a victim of DV, so Leslie offered her education on DV and its related dangers, including the risks it posed to children. The next month, on February 10th, Leslie stopped by the house for another face-to-face visit with Sinead and the children, which this time were 5 years, 2 years, and 8 months old. She noted the house was cluttered, dirty, and smelled damp. She was concerned that Sinead couldn't keep up with the housekeeping. She said Lola looked like she needed a bath and her feet were dirty. Now, like many 2-year-olds, Lola was a handful and her mother was struggling to care for her. Evidence of this struggle can be found in her text history. In one, Sinead described Lola as a terror. She said, "She don't sit still, she beats me up." She had enrolled Lola in a program at Flying Start to help with her behavior. In a later text, Sinead said Lola was doing my head in and threatened that if Lola didn't start behaving, she'd throw her out the window. Sinead told Leslie about the stress Lola was causing. She said there was something wrong with the girl because she was very demanding. She thought Lola might have ADHD. Leslie offered parental support from a nurse along with speech therapy for the toddler, but Sinead refused the help. Again, Leslie went over the tips for recognizing a person who might commit DV, and she told Sinead not to invite adults into the family home if she didn't know them well or if they used alcohol or drugs. Sinead did not mention any new romantic partners, though it is possible she had already met her next boyfriend. He was exactly the kind of person Leslie was warning her about. Later that same day, Sinead visited her general practitioner, Dr. Annaline Holliday. She told the doctor that watching Lola was exhausting. She said the toddler stayed up until 2 a.m. every night and would throw her food back at her. She also complained of the flashbacks from the DV, which caused her to be tearful sometimes. The doctor prescribed antidepressants, which Sinead would later say worked well for her.
Sometime in February, Sinead got a friend request over social media from a complete stranger named Kyle Bevan. She accepted and the two began exchanging messages. Kyle described himself as a recovering crack and spice addict, though he still drank alcohol and used amphetamines, Xanax, Valium, and weed, so his recovery seemed quite limited. He had a young daughter from a previous relationship, but he wasn't in contact with her. Though Sinead said she was, in her own words, frightened of every man because of her history as a victim of DV, she thought Kyle would be her protector. Within hours of their first conversation, they began a relationship. Reports vary, but either the day after they started talking or just a few days later, Kyle moved in with Sinead and her 3 vulnerable children. It was not long before the girls started accumulating injuries and bruises, especially Lola, who was still too young to clearly explain what was happening to her. On April 19th, Kyle was awake while Sinead was asleep upstairs. He sent a message saying Lola tripped over toys while coming down the stairs at 2 a.m. He had said that she had smashed her face and got a bloody nose. On April 26th, Sinead noticed Lola had a scrape on her chin. Kyle explained it away as Lola just falling, and he called her a crazy kid. Sinead said Kyle was really good with Lola. She said he would cook her dinner, he would do stuff with her, he was always buying her stuff she didn't need, but he would treat her. Sometimes Kyle seemed to enjoy the children, but at other times his mood shifted and they frustrated him. One message, he talked about buying Lola presents and said she was fun to be around, but in another, he said, "Too many kids in the house, just doing my head in." When he was in a bad mood, he was nasty and intimidating.
Under ordinary circumstances, health visitor Leslie Stedman would have returned to the home in April. However, the world events of 2020 soon made that impossible as lockdowns were imposed in Wales and around the world. She still kept in touch via telephone, but Sinead would not tell her that Kyle had moved in, and she didn't mention Lola's injuries.
Texts from May 4th showed Lola acting out, possibly to indicate she didn't like Kyle and the way he hurt her. Sinead saw Lola spitting at him and making a horrible noise. Lola also screamed while Kyle was with her. That night, the violence escalated, and Lola ended up with a cut lip. Kyle claimed she fell off her bed, saying she was standing in her cot and she dropped to the floor really quickly. She bit her lip on the way down. I tried to help, but she kicked off. Told Sinead, "I feel like you don't trust me anymore." He also told her, "Lola needs to get used to me, babe. I am not the devil. I think the world of that little girl." Of course, Sinead believed his excuses. May 10th, the baby, Lola's younger sister, had a black eye. Casey Morgan, who is Sinead's best friend and neighbor, was disturbed when she saw it, so she took a picture of it. When Casey asked what happened, Sinead said the baby had an accident while Kyle was watching her. Casey did not like Kyle and told Sinead to get rid of him, that she didn't want him around her house or her kids. By May, Sinead knew that Kyle regularly took strong tranquilizers and often used other drugs. She admitted they both took amphetamines together, but claimed she only participated when the children were out of the house, staying with her mother or other family. May 14th, Kyle took Xanax and flew into a rage. He used a hammer to smash up the house, including the light switches in the kitchen. He tried to headbutt Sinead, and scared, she gathered up the children and ran to Casey's house. They spent the night there, but the next day, Kyle did what abusers always do. He acted contrite and apologized, sent a message that said, "I feel like a monster," and asked Sinead to forgive him. Casey begged her to stay, but Sinead and the children went home the next day. She let Kyle continue living there, and she kept leaving him alone with the kids.
A few days later, her cousin visited and told her that the house was so dirty and cluttered that social services might get involved. Kyle again flew into a rage and got aggressive with her cousin, who quickly left. On June 8th, the health visitor phoned to ask how she and the children were doing. Sinead told her that she had another adult living in her home, but lied and said it was a female person. She didn't report her new relationship or any of the recent injuries to the children, and she concealed the state of her home. Conditions in the home continued to deteriorate. Sinead and Kyle often argued about Lola, and the arguments got heated. In one message, he told her to come get your f***ing child, while in another, it was Sinead who was angry at him for keeping Lola up all night. She messaged, "What's up with you? She needs to be in bed. It's 4 a.m. He replied, "It was one f***ing night, Sinead. She was falling asleep while playing and I was going to carry her up. I wanted to give her a cuddle to sleep, but you f***ed it up." Given his increasing violence towards Lola, it's chilling to imagine what he might have been doing with her in the middle of the night. On June 11th, she and Kyle argued and he grabbed her arm. She texted a friend and said, "I'm done. I'm finished with Kyle. I'm not putting up with it. I have kids to think about." She messaged him saying she was sick of his drug use and told him to get out. Kyle replied saying, "F you, you lying, cheating, childish cunt." Despite his physical and verbal abuse, Sinead backed down and let him stay. And she kept insisting that Kyle was not a danger to her children.
On July 5th, Casey saw Lola at the park and noticed bruises on her legs. There was no indication that Casey discussed her observation with Sinead, and she did not call the police. Sinead was angry with Kyle that day, but not because of what he was doing to Lola. She was angry about the way Kyle was treating her. The same day, she told him to get out again. She texted, "What you are doing is a form of DV. I know, I've been through it." When he refused to leave, she let the matter drop. She didn't call the police or ask for any help evicting him. 2 days later, on July 7th, she and Kyle were outside in the neighborhood pushing the baby in her stroller. Sinead's friend Casey was outside as well. In anger, Kyle shouted, "F*** it," and pushed the stroller with the baby inside into a busy road. Sinead had to dive into the street and pull the baby out of oncoming traffic. Shaken, Sinead asked Casey if she and the kids could spend the night again. Casey agreed, and Sinead left the baby with her while she went back into the house to get the other children. Before Sinead got back, Kyle showed up. Casey said he was, in her own words, foaming by the mouth. His eyes were huge, and he didn't look good. He was aggressive, and it was really scary. A few minutes later, Sinead and the children arrived, looking petrified. They managed to enter Casey's home without further incident, but the next day, Sinead again forgave Kyle. She took the children back home and continued to let him watch them.
On July 9th, Sinead received an ominous warning via social media. The grandmother of Kyle's daughter, not his mother, but the mother of his ex-girlfriend, had heard Kyle was living with Sinead. She reached out to her mom to mom because she thought Sinead should know that Kyle had physically hurt her daughter and her granddaughter in the past. She told Sinead he was a child protection risk. She said, "I'm concerned about the fact that he's around your children." Sinead asked Kyle's mother, Allison Bevan, about the claim. Allison said it wasn't true, and just like that, on the word of someone who was likely biased and trying to protect her son, Sinead dismissed the warning, even though just 2 days before, he pushed her baby out into traffic.
Later that day, Lola's face and nose were hurt quite badly, and again, it happened while Kyle was alone with her. Kyle blamed the family dog, who was an American bulldog named Jessie. He said that Jessie pushed Lola off the couch and face first into the coffee table. Concerned that Lola's nose was broken, Sinead asked a couple of the neighbors to look at it. Noticed Lola also had marks on the side of her neck as if someone had grabbed her there. They said she needed to see a doctor immediately, but Sinead lied and said that she had already seen a doctor. Later, Kyle told her that his mom looked at Lola through a video call and said she was fine. He also told Sinead that his mom was a nurse, but that was not true. Although she did work as a healthcare assistant, she was not a nurse. It is unknown whether the video call ever happened, but Sinead believed him and never took Lola to the doctor. In fact, she didn't take any of the children to the doctor for the injuries they suffered while Kyle was there. The next day, Sinead left Kyle alone with Lola and the baby. She texted him, "You don't need to tell me what you're doing with them. I do trust you with them." The day after that, on July 11th, Lola had another accident while Kyle was watching her, and Sinead texted, "Don't feel bad." Although Sinead has never explained, something must have happened during the next 5 days, because on July 16th, she asked for Kyle's birthday and told him she wanted to run a Clare's Law check on him. Clare's Law, also known as the DV Disclosure Scheme, was implemented in 2014 by all police departments in Wales. Named in honor of Claire Wood, who was murdered by her partner, it allows the police to divulge information they have about dangerous people likely to commit DV. Kyle refused to give Sinead his date of birth and said, "I don't have to give it to you. They won't find anything on me." Still, even with her suspicion aroused, she did nothing to remove Kyle or her children from the home.
That night, her mother was supposed to watch Lola, but Nicola called and said she was feeling too sick. Sometime between 7 and 8 p.m., Sinead went to bed and left Kyle alone downstairs with Lola. Kyle said he took several pictures of her using Snapchat filters and then put her to bed. A few minutes after midnight on July 17th, Sinead was woken by a loud bang and heard Lola screaming. She went to the children's room and found Kyle holding Lola by her bed. He told her, "She's all right, she banged her head, and I've got this." Without comforting Lola or looking at her head, Sinead believed him and went back to bed where she fell asleep. Over the next 4 hours, Kyle beat the toddler, causing multiple injuries. At 4:26 a.m., he took pictures of bruises on her back. In the image, she was still conscious and able to sit up on her own. Temporary tattoos, the toy kind that are sometimes prizes inside of cereal boxes, were visible on her arms. Sometime after taking the picture, he continued the assaults.
2 hours later, around 6:30 a.m., he Googled the phrase, "My 2-year-old child had just taken a bang to the head and gone all limp and snoring." He also searched for loss of consciousness. At 6:37, he took a screenshot of a website on his phone. The image he captured clearly states that if a child has symptoms like excessive bruising, swelling, or loss of consciousness, he should call for an ambulance immediately. But he didn't call for help. In the next 2 minutes, he took more photographs of Lola, who cannot sit up on her own and appears to be unconscious. In the photos, her head, eyes, and lips were extremely swollen and bruised. At 6:40, he calls his mother Allison, but she doesn't answer. He sent her the photos of Lola, but she was asleep and didn't see them until she woke up at 6:55. When she saw those photos, she texted that Kyle should take the toddler directly to the hospital. But instead, he propped his phone up so he could film a gruesome 22-second video. In it, he lifted the unresponsive girl up and tried to get her to stand on her feet. When he let go, Lola fell back to the floor with an audible thud. He picked her back up and set her on the couch and said, "She's gone. She's gone." He sent the video to his mother at 6:58, but his mother claimed she didn't watch it. At 7 a.m., she texted him again, saying he should wake Sinead up and get emergency help. She messaged him repeatedly over the next 13 minutes, but Kyle did not respond. Instead, he tried to cover up his crime by putting Lola in the bath and dressing her in new night clothes. Around 7:20, he woke Sinead up and told her that an ambulance was on its way because Lola was all limp and had fallen down the stairs. He held out his finger and showed her a piece of Lola's tongue that he said she had bitten off. But no ambulance was on its way because he had still not called one. At 7:28, almost an entire hour after he Googled unconsciousness, he asked his mother to call an ambulance. At 7:29, Allison called emergency services. In her call, she said, "She's a 2-year-old and she's got ADHD. She has fallen top to bottom down the stairs and they can't wake her up. She's unconscious." She also said the girl was floppy and had a massive lump on her head. She said her son didn't call because he didn't have credit on his phone, and the dispatcher told her they don't need credit to call the emergency line. At 7:30, Sinead also placed a 999 call. She told the dispatcher she's fallen down the stairs from the top of the stairs to the bottom. Her head's all swollen and she's bit the top of her tongue off. When asked why she fell, Sinead said, "The bloody dog I have. It just barged her and she fell." While Sinead was on the phone, Kyle took more photographs and videos of Lola unconscious and snoring on the couch. Around 7:34, the ambulance and paramedics arrived. Kyle told paramedics, "I think the dog tripped her over," and that she had fallen down the steps. They noted the girl's face was swollen and badly bruised, and she appeared to be wet. She was not wearing a diaper underneath her pajamas, which was unusual because she wore one to bed. She was badly hurt and unconscious, but she was still alive. She was rushed to the nearby Whiffy Bush Hospital by ambulance. After a short discussion with the police, Kyle and Sinead went to the hospital. Sinead's mother and Lola's father, Daniel, soon joined them there. Kyle became aggressive when the doctors asked how Lola got her injuries and threatened to rip up their notes. He also got into an argument with Daniel and challenged him to a fight. Everyone else was heartbroken and distraught, but Kyle didn't even pretend to be sad. When she was stabilized, and it was clear she needed specialized treatment, Lola was transferred to Noah's Ark Children's Hospital in Cardiff, about an hour away. Sinead and her mother followed her to the second hospital, but Kyle, on the other hand, decided to go home.
Kyle didn't answer the door right away when officers stopped by at 11 a.m. When he finally let them inside, they saw he had been vacuuming the living room floor, which seemed suspicious given the general disarray and dirtiness of the rest of the house. Every room was cluttered, clothes on the floor and items on every flat surface. Even the stovetop had open cereal boxes sitting on the burners. A table in the living area was crowded with cigarette butts, empty food wrappers, and cleaning products. Despite the mess, the bathtub was spotless and looked like it had been recently cleaned. During a search of the property, investigators found gray child's pajamas in the corner of a living room. The pajamas were wet, covered in vomit, and blood-stained. The police asked if he had a mobile phone, and Kyle said he didn't. When officers heard it ringing and found it hidden under a blanket, they made him hand it over. He repeated his claim that the dog must have pushed her down the stairs. He said he was downstairs making coffee when Lola woke up and walked to the top of the stairs naked. He said, "I assume she ripped her nappy off before you questioned me on that." He asked her if she wanted some cereal and went back to the kitchen to fix her a bowl. I could hear footsteps on the ceiling upstairs, and next thing I heard was 2 or 3 massive bangs. Boom, boom, boom. I came running around the corner and she was on the floor. He said she was out cold and snoring, which he thought meant she was choking on her tongue. When he checked her mouth, he'd found she had bitten a chunk of it off. He said he moved her to the couch and dressed her because she was cold. He said he attempted CPR by blowing into her mouth. Kyle described Lola as accident-prone, a nutcase, and an idiot. He said she always falls and smacks her face or lacks awareness. He said Sinead fed her ice lollies all the time, constantly ice lollies. He also said Lola was crazy, absolutely crazy. She's a bundle of energy, man. They're testing her for ADHD and autism. He was clearly trying to convince them that whatever happened was Lola's fault. When asked why he waited so long to call the ambulance, he said, "I had to stop her chewing on her tongue, put her on the sofa, put clothes on her, and put the dog out. I sat next to her and prayed, really." He described his relationship with Sinead as pretty good and said he often went through her phone to keep an eye on her.
When police interviewed Sinead, she also told them Lola had 2 left feet and that she doesn't sleep and falls over everything. She said Kyle was amazing with Lola, and she didn't believe for a second that he would have hurt her. However, her opinion changed after police showed her the video Kyle had taken of Lola's unconscious body falling to the floor with a loud thud. After watching it, she said she felt sick and wanted to punch him in the face. She said, "If he can do that, what has actually happened to my baby?" Later that day, around 3:15, Kyle texted Sinead that they needed to make sure their stories matched, saying they needed to be bang on. He texted, "They think we hurt Lola. She fell down the stairs and the marks are from when the dog jumped up on her. It happens all the time." Later he wrote, "I would never hurt her like that. I really hope you know I'd done everything I could." At 4:34, police arrested Sinead at Noah's Ark Hospital on suspicion of child neglect. 4:37, they found Kyle at a neighbor's house and arrested him as well. Both were questioned and subsequently released. 4 days later, on July 21st, Lola died as the result of her injuries. She was only 2 years and 10 months old. Her father, Daniel, stayed by her side during her last days. He said, "The guilt I feel lives inside me and will never leave, as the memory of Lola lying in a hospital bed fighting to stay alive will remain with me always."
After Lola passed, the police went back to the house to question the couple again. Sinead was erratic and panicking when she answered the door. They described Kyle's behavior as agitated and obstructive. When police explained they just needed to make sure nothing dodgy happened and they were just doing their jobs, Kyle was confrontational. He replied, "You chose to be a copper." Both Kyle and Sinead were arrested again in January of 2021, this time on suspicion of murder and released on conditional bail. On April 21st, 2022, they were arrested a third and final time. Kyle was charged with murder and causing the death of a child. He was held with no bail. Sinead was charged with causing or allowing the death of a child. She was put in jail for her own safety after receiving threats from community members. On June 29th, they both pled not guilty. Kyle was returned to jail to await his trial. Sinead was released on conditional bail.
The trial began on March 7th, 2023, and was presided over by Sir Martin Alexander Griffiths in Swansea Crown Court. Prosecutor Caroline Rees said Lola had been the victim of a frenzied and extremely violent attack that lasted for 6.5 hours. She presented evidence that showed Kyle waited an hour to call an ambulance while he photographed and filmed Lola's dying body. He bathed her to cover up evidence, scrubbing so hard he removed the temporary tattoos applied on her arm. He also hid her soiled pajamas and likely hid or disposed of the weapons he used in his assault. During his testimony, Sinead called Kyle a monster. She expressed regret, saying she wondered whether Lola would still be alive if she had got him out of the house. She said, "I beat myself up every day. He needs to rot in hell." She also claimed to be asleep during the incident, which prosecutors believed in part because they found no activity occurred on her cell phone during that time. One witness called to testify was Coral Barker, who had owned Jessie the bulldog before giving her to Sinead. Coral said Jessie liked cuddles and that she was very well behaved with her 4 young children. She also said that because of Kyle's accusation, they were forced to put Jessie to sleep.
Dr. Michelle Jardine, an intensive care pediatrician with over 12 years' experience with young trauma patients, said the toddler's body was one of the most extensively bruised and battered bodies she had ever seen. Dr. Deborah Stalker, a consultant pediatrician, testified that 101 bruises and scratches all over Lola's body were not consistent with an accidental fall down the carpeted stairs. She didn't think that there was a part of her body that wasn't bruised. Many of her bruises were larger than the ones caused by the accident, and some were consistent with being grabbed and squeezed by a human hand, typically only found in cases of CA. The doctor believed some of Lola's injuries were caused by weapons that had not been found at the scene. In particular, her right thigh had circular bruises in a distinctive linear pattern, and the bleeding puncture wounds on her forehead appeared to be caused by a different weapon. Her back and legs had been hit by yet another unidentified weapon. The pattern showed 3 or 4 blows that caused large bruises. The injuries on her neck were not consistent with an accident, but were consistent with strangulation. The bruising on Lola's ears almost never happens by accident. It was usually the result of a direct blow.
Dr. Stalker said the large subdural hemorrhage Lola had was usually the result of a high-velocity road traffic collision, where a child is thrown from the car, or a fall from a great height, such as a fall from a balcony or bedroom window of more than 10 feet. Of course, neither of those things had happened in this case, so the only other cause would have been violent shaking and forceful impacts. She said physical CA was the most likely cause. Stair fall does not explain the catastrophic and extensive injuries to the head with bleeding to both eyes. Lola's eyes had been horribly injured. All 4 quadrants in both of her eyes were bleeding from multiple places, including from the optic nerve sheath. She had retinal fold and retinal splitting, injuries caused when the retina wrinkles and detaches, both signs of shaken baby syndrome. The doctor said, "The whole picture of Lola's head injuries led me to conclude they were caused by abusive head trauma, most likely from being violently shaken. Her cause of death was brain damage." Consultant neuroradiologist Dr. Neil Studley examined CT and MRI scans of Lola's head and independently came to the same conclusion. He said the subdural bleeding occurred mainly over the front left side of her brain, but also on the back right side and at the base of her brain. This was caused by forceful shaking and impact on the left side of her head. Her scalp was swollen in several places, as were her ears, which he pointed to as additional evidence of impact. He testified her injuries could not be explained by a fall down the stairs, and they were caused by inappropriate force. In his report, Dr. Studley wrote that the injuries inside her skull caused extensive brain damage that led her to death. They were due to abusive head trauma, likely to have occurred as a result of a shaking mechanism or a forceful impact to the left side of the head, or a combination of both these mechanisms. In layman's terms, Kyle shook Lola and bashed her head into something solid.
Prosecutor Rees acknowledged that Kyle covered up his actions with multiple excuses, but she argued that Sinead should have been well aware of the risk of violence Kyle posed. As a mother, it was her job to protect Lola, but Sinead did nothing. The jury deliberated for 10 hours. On April 4th, they found Kyle guilty of murder and Sinead guilty of causing or allowing Lola's death.
At the sentencing hearing on April 25th, Lola's grandmother and father both gave impact statements. Nicola addressed Kyle directly, saying, "You killed my Lola and you have broken her family. I hope with the time you have now, you can understand what you have done. Lola's clothes still hang in the wardrobe and her toys are still in the cupboard, but she is no longer here." She also told the court she lives with constant regret because she felt ill on the night her granddaughter needed her the most. Daniel grieved the life Lola would never get to live. He said, "As a parent, all I could hope for was that Lola would continue to grow with happiness and health, with the courage in her heart to know she could be anything and do anything she wanted. But that will never be. I will never get to meet my daughter as a teenager or a woman. All I have left are memories of a beautiful baby and dreams of the child she can never become." Before Justice Griffith handed down their sentences, he considered mitigating factors such as the possibility that Sinead was afraid of Kyle, but ultimately determined she was not. The messages between the two didn't indicate fear. Instead, she showed she was in control and able to leave when she wanted. She had the support of friends, neighbors, and family. Even with other options, the judge said she consistently prioritized the relationship with Kyle Bevan over concern for her children. For her crime, he sentenced Sinead to 6 years in prison. She must serve 3 years before becoming eligible for release on license, which is similar to what we would call parole. Justice Griffiths noted Kyle's lack of remorse. He said, Kyle started to hurt Lola at midnight and he carried on until she was unconscious at 6:30 a.m. Because this sustained, deliberate, and violent attack was completely unprovoked and carried out against a vulnerable child, he sentenced Kyle to life in prison. He must serve a minimum of 28 years before possible release on license. Sinead also lost custody of her surviving children, although she remained in contact with them. Her mother, Nicola, said she hopes Sinead gets the help she needs while behind bars.
Lola's funeral was held in St. David and St. Patrick Catholic Church in Haverfordwest on September 15, 2020. After the service, her pink and white casket was taken to the cemetery by horse and carriage. The route through town was announced, down Captain James Hill, through Front Street, and North Road across Marble Hall. The family asked the community to watch the procession and encouraged them to clap, cheer, or let off a balloon to celebrate Lola's life. She was buried at Thornton Cemetery. Citizens of Haverfordwest were deeply saddened by her death. At a makeshift memorial outside her home, they left toys and stuffed animals for the toddler. A family friend who wished to remain anonymous said, "I knew her for her entire life and she was such a happy little girl. I have so many amazing memories of her. There was never a time that she wasn't smiling, and she had the cutest little smile. I hope that everyone dealing with this tragedy is okay, but I don't think this town will ever be the same again. So many people have been affected by this, and it's not an easy thing to go through." Local councillor Thomas Tudor agreed, saying, "It's a terrible tragedy that has happened. The town is in a state of shock."
After Lola's death, the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children called for an investigation, which they call a Child Protective Review. The Society's local director, Tracy Holdsworth, asked the government to make protecting children a national priority. She said, "The review must be robust in finding whether more could have been done to protect this little girl and how agencies working together can better prevent future tragedies." According to reporting by BBC Wales, there were an alarming number of ongoing reviews, over 30, and at least 4 other children in addition to Lola died during the nationwide lockdowns. Until the reports have been published, the reason for the large number won't be clear. Experts believe the isolation likely played a part, but they don't think it was the sole cause. Dr. Dewey Evans, pediatrician and expert witness on child protection cases, said recent cuts to service have impacted the effectiveness of local agencies. He said they spend a lot of time firefighting. They spend most of their time chasing after those families where the injuries have already taken place, so there is no time or resources to prevent these risks occurring. And, of course, prevention is better than cure.
A child practice review was started after Lola's death, but put on hold after Kyle and Sinead's trials were completed. It was restarted in April of 2023. Although reviews often take about 6 months to complete, this one is taking longer. As of the date of this recording, no deadline has been set for completion and publication of the review. We will update you if any additional information becomes available.
Lola's father, Daniel, wrote the following in a tribute to Lola. It read, "The pain and grief I feel every time I close my eyes and see your perfect little face is unbearable. Even to say your name shatters my heart. The only reason I can stand here today is for hope that you can see me, see that you are loved and that you deserve to live a full, happy, safe life surrounded by the joy that you gave to others. I'm so sorry your short life was filled with so much pain. You were so loved, Lola, and so missed every single day." In her tribute, Lola's grandmother, Nicola, said, "My last memory with Lola is hearing her sing the song Diamonds by Rihanna. She and her sister had spent time learning the song and making up a little dance so they could put on a show for us. She will forever be a diamond up in the sky. We will never, ever forget her. We will continue to keep her memory alive. We write her letters and we talk to her in the sky at night. As a family, we will never get over this. The loss that we feel is indescribable. We haven't begun to process all of this and don't know if we ever will. Lola, we love you. We will always love you, and we will miss you forever.
Finley Bowden was born in England on February 15th, 2020 to parents Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden. Stephen and Shannon met in 2017 when Shannon was 17 years old and Stephen was 25. The young family lived in Old Whittington, a village in the borough of Chesterfield in Derbyshire. Baby Finley was still mostly bald, with small tufts of blonde hair beginning to poke through, and bright blue expressive eyes. According to Amanda O'Rourke, who was Finley's court-appointed guardian for a period of time, the little boy was a smiler who liked to blow raspberries. At the time of our story, he was only 10 months old.
From the very beginning, 30-year-old Stephen and 22-year-old Shannon were on social services radar. Shannon notified the agency that she was 20 weeks pregnant in September of 2019. Child welfare became involved in their lives due to the concerns over substance use, family violence, and due to the fact that they were living in squalor. Stephen cared more about spending money on weed than caring for his new baby. In fact, Stephen first started regularly smoking at 9 years old. Shannon began drinking at age 9 and smoking regularly by age 10. Although weed is legal in many US states, it is still prohibited in the UK as of the date of this recording. Stephen was also known to have an extremely violent temper, often punching holes in doors and the drywall. He had 22 previous convictions, some of which were for theft and family violence. According to neighbors that knew the couple, they were prone to having violent arguments that would often turn physical. As the world was neck deep in the pandemic at the time, social services were concerned about a newborn and a young woman being locked down with a volatile man. Due to these circumstances, Finley Bowden was taken into custody 3 days after his birth and remained in care for the first 9 months of his life. According to King's Counsel prosecutor Mary Pryor, Finley was fit and well, safe and happy during the time away from his parents. However, Stephen and Shannon requested to have custody of their son, and that request was quickly granted by the family court system. In fact, they ordered his return within 8 weeks, and despite one of the reasons that occasioned Finley's removal, there was no order put in place mandating that his parents submit to regular testing for substance use. The court, who held a hearing over the phone, found that the couple did not, in their words, pose such a risk to their son that the situation was not manageable or required him to be placed out of their care in the foreseeable future. Stephen and Shannon completely fooled social services, convincing them that they were making real changes in their lives. They even redid his whole bedroom, except they had no concrete plans to change and actually take care of their little boy.
Baby Finley should have been enjoying his very first Christmas with his parents, but that's not what happened. On December 23, 2020, Stephen texted his dealer and told him, "I want to bounce him off the walls." He was referring to Finley. In the days leading up to the holiday, Stephen and Shannon canceled Finley's health visitor appointment and told social service workers that the baby had a virus and that they couldn't see him when they dropped in unannounced. At 2:27 a.m. on Christmas morning 2020, a 999 call was placed from the family's Old Whittington home to report that little Finley was unresponsive. The 10-month-old was whisked away to the hospital, where first responders worked feverishly to revive him. Sadly, there was nothing anyone could do, and Finley Bowden was pronounced dead at 3:45 a.m., just an hour and 18 minutes later. He'd only been in the care of his parents for a total of 39 days. While still at the hospital, Stephen told Shannon that he planned to sell Finley's stroller on eBay, but when called out on this statement later, claimed he only said it in an effort to lighten the mood.
Finley's death was immediately deemed suspicious. At autopsy, the medical examiner found 71 bruises on his tiny body, as well as 2 burns that were alleged to be from a cigarette lighter. In addition, Finley had 57 broken bones, including to his pelvis, shoulder, ankle, and ribs. In fact, his pelvis was broken in 2 separate places, and it was thought that he had sustained these injuries from a grown adult kicking or stomping on him. The medical examiner likened Finley's injuries to that of a baby that had been dropped out of a multi-story building. According to Detective Inspector Paul Bullock of the Derbyshire Police, the violence that Finley sustained was both incomprehensible and amongst the worst I've seen in my 27-year policing career. According to reports, Finley was no longer able to sit up and play with his toys. He was unable to feed himself, and his daily experience was one of considerable pain, distress, and suffering. In addition, Finley's frail state made him susceptible to infections, including pneumonia and sepsis. Toxicology reports also found THC in the 10-month-old system, which means that Stephen and Shannon would have been actively smoking around him in the days leading up to his death. Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden were promptly arrested and charged with their son's murder. At their trial, Justice Amanda Tipples had harsh words for the couple and painted the pair as both persuasive and accomplished liars who denied their son the medical care that could have saved his life. She also noted the plethora of injuries that little Finley suffered could only have been inflicted by the couple working in consort. Justice Tipples added, "No one heard Finley cry or scream in pain because you inflicted the injuries on him together, with one of you fracturing his bones and the other keeping him quiet with your hand over his mouth." According to King's Counsel prosecutor Mary Pryor, the defendants knew they were causing serious harm to Finley and persisted with it. They were indifferent to it. She told the court how the 10-month-old was forced to sleep in bedding stained with his own blood and vomit.
After a trial that lasted 5 months that included testimony that baby Finley essentially had broken every bone in his body, the jury, many of whom were in tears, found both Stephen and Shannon guilty on all counts. Justice Amanda Tipples, who was also emotional, sentenced them accordingly.
Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden, I must sentence you both for murder. The only sentence I can pass on you is one of life imprisonment. It is, in any event, the proper sentence for your crime. I also have to set the minimum term that you must serve before the parole board can consider you for release. That minimum term will reflect your overall criminality. The minimum term in your case, Stephen Bowden, will be 29 years. From that you must have deducted the number of days you have already spent in custody, which I'm told is 519 days. Please can Stephen Bowden be taken down. The minimum term in your case, Shannon Marsden, will be 27 years. From that you must have deducted the number of days you've already spent in custody, which I'm told is 519 days. Please can Shannon Marsden be taken down.
She went on to note that, once the injuries had been inflicted, Finley's daily experience was one of considerable pain, distress, and suffering, and that neither parent showed any remorse for what they had done. Following the sentencing, Detective Inspector Steve Shaw shared the following words from the courthouse steps.
Bowden and Marsden, from the moment Finley returned to their care, throughout the trial, after conviction, and even at sentence, have never taken responsibility for their actions. They lied and obstructed professionals who were attempting to see Finley to establish that he was being cared for in the correct manner. They refused because they knew that once a professional saw the state of the home and the condition that Finley was in, he would have been taken from their care. They conspired between them to ensure that no professional would see Finley and keep their awful crimes a secret. But we now know the truth, and they have paid the price with their liberty. I hope that for Finley's wider family, today will bring a degree of closure.
He also went on to state that, we have seen a mother and a father jailed for what is quite simply an incomprehensible crime. They knew that they were responsible for those injuries, and instead of doing the right thing and taking Finley to get urgent medical care, they took him shopping in Chesterfield Town Center as though nothing was wrong. In actual fact, Finley was dying. In the wake of Finley's death, there were a lot of questions that needed answering. For example, social services was already involved in the family's life long before Finley was even born. So how did things turn out so horribly?
So by summer of 2020, pandemic restrictions had started to ease to the point where Stephen and Shannon wanted visitation with their son and began working with a social worker named Lynn Williams to help facilitate that. In her notes, she wrote that on warmer days, Shannon ensured that Finley was in the shade and that her holding her son's hand while he was in the stroller was a natural response from a caring parent. Ms. Williams claimed that Stephen talked to his son and made him smile. During a visit in August, she noted that the fridge and cupboards were stocked with food and the home appeared neat and tidy. The couple also claimed to have given up on smoking weed, but tests conducted months later proved that that was a lie. On October 1st, 2020, the family court ruled that Finley was eligible for family reunification and set up an 8-week plan in which the infant would be gradually reintroduced to his family. This included supervised and unsupervised visits and overnight stays, but this was all supposed to happen gradually. The family was also to undergo 12 months of supervisions and home monitoring. The family social worker actually suggested that instead of an 8-week plan, that the transition should take place over the course of 4 to 6 months due to the concerns of whether or not Stephen and Shannon could actually parent Finley. However, all of this was ignored, and on November 17th, Finley was returned to his parents' care. Just 2 days later, a social worker making a home visit noticed a 4-centimeter bump on the baby's head, which Stephen and Shannon claimed was caused by a toy. Just over a week later, on November 27th, another social worker, Emily Hollandale, observed Finley sleeping on the couch unsupervised while his parents listened to music in an upstairs bedroom. She had seen the little boy through a downstairs window as the music was so loud that the couple couldn't hear her knocking. This was the last time that anyone from social services witnessed little Finley alive. On December 23rd, just 2 days before Finley would be pronounced dead, a social worker tried to pay a visit to the home, but Stephen refused to let her inside. She also observed Shannon standing in the street about 100 or so yards away, conducting what appeared to her to be a drug deal. That same day, Finley was registered to take a pandemic-related virus test that YouTube doesn't let us say the word of, but never made it to the appointment, and Shannon was Googling symptoms of sepsis. Finally, on December 24th, Stephen and Shannon were caught on CCTV bringing Finley to multiple locations. If you quickly look at the right side of your screen, you see what is reported to be Shannon pushing Finley. This is around 2:26 p.m. You can see she is slowly pushing him down the street here. Now, a few hours later, at 7:16, here's Stephen pushing him into a Tesco Express. Seemingly not really concerned about getting him proper help. They had plenty of time to do so. And while Stephen clearly looks concerned here, there's not a whole lot of urgency in getting his son help. And furthermore, why not just go to a hospital? By now, Finley would have been suffering from sepsis and an agonizing pain from all of his broken bones, but still, his parents couldn't be bothered to bring him to the emergency room before it was too late. In the end, 2 magistrates, Kathy Gallimore and Susan Burns, and a legal advisor found that the 8-week transition period, rather than the 4 to 6 month proposed transition period, was, in their words, a reasonable and proportionate length of time. In addition, the Children and Families Court Advisory Service claimed that it is not possible to say whether a longer transition plan would have prevented Finley's death. What led to his death was the ability of his parents to deceive everyone involved about their love for him and their desire to care for him. If that's not crazy enough, after reading transcripts of the family court hearings, Justice Natalie Levin claimed that the courts made a reasonable decision. She said, "Having read the papers here, I have every sympathy with the decision the magistrates made."
Toby Perkins, who is a British Labour Party politician who has served as a Member of Parliament for Chesterfield since 2010, has called for further inquiry into Derbyshire's child welfare system. In an interview with the BBC, he said, "It is legitimate to question that entire process, whether the care required for Finley Bowden's safety was preserved by that process." He added that, "We remain fully engaged with the statutory legal review process, which looks in depth at the role of all agencies following the death of a child. We're really glad that Mr. Perkins is taking this seriously, because the fact that Stephen and Shannon couldn't be bothered to keep sweet Finley alive for 39 days is just unimaginable. And it makes you wonder why on earth they wanted him back in the first place."
This case draws a lot of parallels to the story of Christian Crossland, which we released on this channel back in November. In 2018, when he was about 2 years old, his mother Chelsea left him in the care of his guardians, Brittany Ballinger and Trevor Easton. The couple raised Christian as their own son up until January 8th of 2022. It was then after Chelsea gave birth to her 4th child that she wanted to get the family back together. From there, she proceeded to beat and starve Christian over the course of 74 days. And for what? The little boy had a family that loved him. Why on earth would Chelsea bring him home just to murder him?
There's no public obituary for Finley Bowden, but his Find a Grave page notes that he was cremated. The only public memorial that we were able to find for this little boy was a message posted by user SSBJ on his Find a Grave page, which reads, "Murdered. Returned to parents by Child Protection Services. Precious, perfect little human being. No more pain, nor torture at the hands of family. We here love you and will protect your sweet memory."